Hello everyone, I'm Prem Elias, former head of the Department of English, Fatima the National College, affiliated to the University of Kerala. Please subscribe to our channel by clicking on the subscribe button. Today, I'm going to discuss a very popular poem by a poet, that is Walter de la Mare. And the poem that I'm discussing is The Listeners. Now, something about the poet. Walter de la Mare was an English poet, short story writer, and a novelist. His poetry spans the first half of the 20th century. From Songs of Childhood, published in 1902, to Oh Lovely England, published in 1953. He's a master of short lyrics. He has written more than 800 short lyrics. Well, The Listeners and Other Poems, published in 1912, includes some of his best lyrics. He was awarded the Order of Merit in 1953. He died on 22nd June 1956. Incidentally, today is June 22nd, and it's a death anniversary of 64th death anniversary of Walter de la Mare. Now, about this poem. The poem exemplifies de la Mare's mastery of the art of creating an uncanny atmosphere. Now, I'll read the poem first. Is there anybody there? Said the traveler, knocking on the moonlit door, and his horse in silence champed the grasses of the forest's ferny floor, and a bird flew up out of the turret above the traveler's head, and he smote upon the door again a second time. Is there anybody there? He said. But no one descended to the traveler. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes, where he stood perplexed and still. But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men, stood thronging the faint moonbeams on the dark stair that goes down to the empty hall, hearkening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveller's call, and he felt in his strange heart their strangeness, their stillness answering his cry, when his horse moved, cropping the dark turf beneath the starred and leafy sky. For he suddenly smote on the door even louder and lifted his head. Tell them I came. And no one answered, that I kept my word, he said. Never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through the shadowiness of the still house. From the one man left awake, they heard his foot upon the stirrup, and a sound of iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backward when plunging hoofs were gone. This is the poem. Now, I'll explain the poem. The Listeners. Is there anybody there? Said the traveler. It's an abrupt beginning, abrupt opening. He does not build up a particular atmosphere, a traveler. Is there anybody there? And he was knocking on the moonlit door. That means it's night. And on that moonlit night, a traveler is knocking on the door. And his horse in silence champed the grasses. So, it's a rider. It's night, a moonlit night. And he comes riding his horse. And he asks the question, is there anybody there? And the horse, it was munching the grasses on the forest ferny floor. So it's a forest. So a forest, dark moonlit night, a rider comes there and asks, is there anybody there? And a bird flew out of the turret. Turret is a small round tower on the top of a castle. So it's a castle. And a bird flew up out of the turret above the traveler's head. And he smote upon the door again a second time. Is there anybody there? He said. But no one dissented to the traveler. No one dissented. So, no one came down the stairs of that castle. Nobody answered his call. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes. No head from the leaf-fringed sill. There is the edge of the window, bordered with leaves of some creepy plants like the ivy. That means it's a desolate castle. It's not properly maintained. That's why the ivy plant has crept over the sill. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes. Now the grey eyes, that means this traveler is not a young man. Maybe he is middle-aged. He's a middle-aged person. Also, grey is often used to describe unclarity or confusion. The word grey is a key word. A middle-aged person, and he is confused, he is perplexed. So, no head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes, where he stood perplexed and still. He stood there. He was perplexed because nobody answered his call. He expected somebody to be there, but only a host of phantom listeners. Well, the eerie atmosphere, the phantom listeners, the ghosts, the listeners were ghosts. So here we have two worlds, the world of the living, the world of the dead. The rider is from the world of the human beings, the living human beings, and the listeners are from the other world, the world of the dead. But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then. So there was no living being. There was only phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then, and stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight. It's a moonlit night. Everything is quiet. Now, the silence of the place was broken by a bird flying up over the traveler's head, and the traveler's voice asking, "Is there anybody there?" But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men, stood thronging the faint moonbeams on the dark stair that goes down to the empty hall. So the castle, the stairs leading to a hall that's empty. It's desolate. The castle is desolate. The faint moonbeams falling on the dark stair. Hearkening in air, stirred and shaken by the lonely traveller's call. The traveller is lonely. The phantom listeners, they stood hearkening to, listening to him in air that was stirred and shaken by the traveller's call. And he felt in his heart their strangeness, their stillness answering his cry. Look, he could not see, he could not hear, but he could feel. But he felt in his heart their strangeness, felt in his heart. He could not see the ghosts, they are invisible. They are silent, therefore he could not hear anything, but he could feel their presence while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf. Suddenly, we are brought back to the world of reality, the horse. That's a reality. The horse was cropping the dark turf. It was munching. It champed the grasses beneath the starred and leafy sky. So, starred and leafy sky. It was moonlight. It was a moonlit night, but there was a canopy of trees, the branches of trees over his head, and moonlight was filtering through those leaves. Therefore, leafy sky. For he suddenly smote on the door even louder and lifted his head. Now he becomes impatient. Look, the world of the dead, the world of the living. There's a very narrow margin. The listeners are on the other side, the rider is on this side. And he becomes impatient. He wants to communicate with them. He wants to communicate with the dead souls on the other side of the line. He suddenly smote on the door even louder and lifted his head. "Tell them I came." And no one answered, "That I kept my word," he said. Tell them, tell whom? We do not know. Whoever you are, if you are listening, tell them I came and that I kept my word. Well, what was the word? What was the word that he had given? That he would come back. Yes, he has come back. But those who had to wait for him, they were no more. Tell them I came, and no one answered. I kept my word. Never the least stir made the listeners. But the listeners did not move. Though every word he spake fell echoing to the shadowiness of the still house. From one man left awake. From the one man left awake. The listeners were asleep. That means dead. Sleep is actually a miniature form of death. And this man was the only human being left awake. Of course, the horse was there, the bird. They are from our natural world. But in the supernatural world, they cannot communicate with the living human beings. They listen. Hey, they heard his foot upon the stirrup. he is getting ready to leave. They cannot prevent him from going. And the sound of the iron on the stone, and how the silence softly backward, how the silence surged softly backward when the plunging hoofs were gone. So now, once again, the silence is broken by the plunging hoofs. The sound of iron, the iron shoe, the iron horseshoe stamping on the cobbled stones. That sound could be heard. So silent, it's very silent. But for the bird, the flight of the bird, the horse munching the grass, the traveler's question and message. Okay. Tell them I came and that I kept my word. Here, the undisclosed meaning is as important as the disclosed meaning. There is some mystery and suspense around that empty, deserted castle. Who lived there? Who are the phantom listeners? How did they become ghosts? How did they die? Was it a natural death? Was it an unnatural death? Was it a violent death? Were they expecting the rider? Were they expecting the traveler? He says, I kept my word. There is an invisible line drawn between the natural world and the supernatural world. The rider, his horse, the castle, the forest are from the real world. But on the other side, there are phantom listeners. The speaker is trying to communicate to the listeners, but fails. That people can only watch and listen. They cannot communicate to us. What is in store for us in the life after death? Just like the traveler, we are confused, perplexed. Now the bird flying out and the horse champing are precise pictures. Do they realize that they connect the world of the living with the world of the dead? So many questions remain unanswered. And that's the beauty of the poem. Mystery, there is suspense. Who is the traveler? Why did he come here at this time of the night? Who are the listeners? The phantom listeners. We do not know anything. It's an open ending, left to the imagination of the readers. You imagine. What was his mission? Now, has he come back after successfully completing his mission? We do not know anything. Left to imagination. Bye for the present. Wait for more videos. Thank you.